Alright, so we got through Totally Not Mount Moon, and we're going to go see the Mystic on top of the mountain.
I like the choice of the name Mount Mixtape.
You saw that, did you?
Sure did. I mean, despite myself, I read this thread too, so...
Yeah, for those of you who have been reading the thread, please do not read the thread.
Yeah, all I do is ask people's opinions on things that this game will surely disappoint us with. And I sometimes shitpost about anime, so there's that.
I would say you probably shitpost about anime more than you actually, like, talk about the game itself. I think there was like a page of just discussion of Magical Girl anime.
Hey man, it's great
I
to
mean,
see
can you
you.
blame me given the material?
Hey guys. Wow, did you get even more muscular, Claudio?
That's a weird way to greet somebody.
Okay, yeah, Hermit on the mountains, thirsty for
Always
Claudio,
changing
that's
for the better, you
that's
two.
fine, I guess.
I
Well, I
brought my
mean,
friends, Alex,
can
Michael,
you
and
blame
Rory
'em?
with me.
No,
They
sir.
wanted to check out your record collection and see if you could help them locate an album.
Friends of Claudio and Chandra are always friends of mine. Please, have a seat. I'll make some tea.
I feel like his jacket is a reference to something.
I do too,
So my
but I
new
couldn't
friends here
figure
wanted
out
to
what
talk
it
about some
was.
elusive record they can't seem to track down.
I'm getting
been
sort
looking
of
for it for a while.
sort of a Han
been to
Solo
literally like
vibe, or
10
maybe
record shops.
Harrison
says you've
Ford's
got quite the
jacket from
collection.
Blade Runner.
Yeah, I think that definitely
I
makes
do
sense,
indeed.
especially with the
what
pleating
sort
on
of
the
music
sides, the way
interests
they've
young
got it.
people these days? Hair metal, power metal, speed metal, metallic metal, pop punk thrash metal.
I mean, I'm not really into metal. I mean, it's cool.
What's your favorite genre of metal?
As far as metal goes, I think I really kind of got into, well, when I was a metalhead back in the day, I was really into like 80s speed metal, so stuff like Megadeth and Slayer and stuff like that.
No, she isn't
Also,
here.
thanks Mark,
She
you're
threw
still
a
being
hissy fit
weird.
when she found out we were looking for this record.
Hissy fit. Do people even say that?
They do.
I don't believe they
You've
do.
heard an example.
So, what sort of music are you into, Alex?
Oh, usually down-tempo
It's a
stuff
tricky
with
thing to
trumpets,
classify as
acoustic
metal,
guitars,
but if you've
bells,
heard
key
Rodrigo
pianos,
y
and
Gabriela
female
before, I
vocalists
definitely
sing sexually
recommend them
outrageous
for acoustic metal.
I
have
don't
actually
think
heard
I have
Rodrigo y
anything like
Gabriela.
that.
They just
Perhaps
released
you
a new
noticed
album
my
pretty
collection of
recently.
Guitars.
Yeah, I think I saw it on the way in. You play?
I do.
Mark here made his fortune playing music. Well, before he became a world traveler. Mark sponsored the Bring Him Home concert for my cousin who fought in the Gulf War.
The only sort of disconcerting thing I note in this particular scene is that there's a pretty big disconnect between Mark's visual novel portrait
see,
and his in-game model.
I don't know quite what that's supposed to be going for, because it almost looks like they just sort of forgot to treat his portrait right, so it doesn't have the right color.
Right.
With the power of the metal gods channeling through my guitar strings, I was able to bring peace and prosperity
The main
to
thing
the Middle
being
East.
that his colors are definitely a little bit more saturated
Well,
in
he got our cousin.
his in-game model versus the one
Yeah,
that's
I did.
in the visual
Okay,
novel
I got
portrait.
ahead of myself. I brought peace to one family whose son had been taken captive. It's a harrowing tale filled with adventure and intrigue.
It almost looks like
Yeah,
the
I don't
one
know if we really
that's in the visual novel
And besides,
is
I
like
said,
the
I'm
one
not
in-game
that into metal.
minus a visual
All
filter,
the
you
bad
know?
Fashions,
Yeah.
teased hair. It's also 80s.
Like they just forgot to leave the brown on.
Also, don't worry, Diacorns, I feel like this game is steadily sapping my language ability
Yeah,
as well.
I'm gonna pretend that you don't mean to imply that
Yeah,
heavy metal
I think
can't
about
be
20 episodes
about
ago
food.
I was a lot
Clearly,
better
you've
at
never heard the
criticizing this
soaring
game, but now
scream
I'm
of the
just like,
guitar paired in
tee-hee,
perfect counterpoint to an
hipster
orchestra
man bad.
accompanied by the sound of a trillion angels. You, my dear boy,
Based
must
on the
listen to my
material,
greatest hit.
We're not
Murder
having a
Run
heck
and
of a lot more to
Melancholia
work
Reigns
with
Unbroken.
recently other than that.
It's a lot less depressing.
Also,
than it
Murder
sounds.
Run would be a
All
great
of
name
Mark's
for a
music is like
synthwave
that.
album.
Yeah.
He has albums and albums filled with skeletons and decaying corpses. but somehow he
And I mean,
manages to
skeletons
make
and
music
decaying
that
corpses
speaks
could
to the soul.
potentially have a place in
Like
synthwave
Scene
as
of
well.
Decay, The Stone, Part
Yes,
9.
they could,
The
but it's
first
really
few
more
songs
like
of
sort of
that album
dark
are
synthwave.
really beautiful, Alex. Disfigured by Eliga's on High Altar of Honor. That is my personal favorite. I used to hula hoop to it all the time.
One of Mark's tracks were featured in some pretty great animes.
Oh
Dragon of
god.
Delusion
Hooray.
and Powered by Delirium were featured in my second favorite anime, Panic Control.
Well, at least that anime has a more reasonable
enough
sounding
about this
title.
topic. Can you tell me
Yeah,
about this
the
tea we're drinking?
very brief word salad anime titles are
This
usually
here is something I
pretty
only
special in
bring out
their
when
own right.
friends are over. It's called Dahang Pao. It's a world-famous tea, exceptionally rare and difficult to come by.
Well, how nice of him to
The
share it
bushes
with
that
us.
produce this tea are
Yeah.
reportedly over 1,000 years old. Make sure you don't spill a
Unfortunately, my
drop.
Mandarin
This
is
is very
non-existent,
special
so I couldn't even begin to guess
you
at
get
what the
this?
name
It's
means.
amazing.
Well,
It is amazing,
yeah,
right?
I
Can't
don't
explain
know
in
if that's
detail
even
how all these
Mandarin, right? That could be
circumstances
a
are
bunch of
related.
different things.
It would be a very long
Mandarin was my
and
first
very
guess based on
complicated story. And
just how
I
it was
mean
Romanized.
No disrespect to you when I say this. It would be
Oh, yeah,
virtually
speaking of
impossible
Romanizations,
for you at this stage,
thanks Thread
young
for
man,
pointing out
to
that
understand.
PAK is actually
You are,
an
of course,
alright
in no way
approximation of
responsible
the
for
Korean
this,
surname
but
Park.
I'll
Yeah, I
do
was
my
very
best to
surprised to
explain
hear
the
that. I'd never seen it
circumstances by
written
which
that
I
way.
came to possess this rare leaf. In my youth,
So
I
I'm
was
only
something
somewhat
of a
following
traveler.
along what Mark
I
is
lived
saying,
for
and
journeying and discovery.
again, I feel like there's still kind of
I
a
had a
problem
partner,
here
a
in that,
very good man,
despite being,
became ill
you
in
know,
his
polite and kind of
mid-30s.
affable as a character and
At
an
the
interesting
time,
take on
I
a whole
considered myself
old
to be
man
very
mentor
worldly.
what lives at top
I
of
lived for
mountain
the dirt
to
under my
provide
feet,
tutelage
but
to hero.
I also did not
I don't
believe in the
really see
supernatural
where
life form.
how anything he's talking
Alas,
about
my
at this
partner
point
came
is
down with a
relevant to
severe
what
stomach
we've
cancer
happened
that
upon
began
up
to
to
claim
now.
his life.
I mean, I get that it's kind of
He was
character
a
building, it's
spiritual man,
just
one might say,
establishing,
and
but
he believed in
again, there's a
miracles.
lot of space
His
being spent
faith
here on
and his
something
failing body
where the
led to the
importance
ending
doesn't
of our
seem
friendship.
to
He
connect
left for
with
India,
what
and
is
I stayed
what
back
we're
in
actually here
Arizona,
for.
where I'd built a life for myself in between
Yeah,
trips.
as weird as
He was
it
gone
is
for
for me
many
to
weeks
say
when I
this,
received a
now,
letter
and
from
bear
him.
with me, this is a
The
low
letter
bar to
was
set.
scribbled in
YIIK
the
has
handwriting
done
of a
better
dying
character
man.
building
It
conversations,
featured
right?
Right.
Like,
that upon
like
further
the thing in the
inspection
diner,
atlas
for example.
proved to
You know,
be
we
in the
talked about
mountains of
that
India.
pretty extensively.
So
The way
I
that
began
you
my journey.
do downtime
After many
in
days of
games like
travel,
this and
I
fiction
arrived
in
at the
general
summit
is
of
that
Mount
even if it's just
Kanchenjunga.
people
I
building
paid
and
a local
establishing their
village boy to
characters, it
guide
still
me to the
ties into a
location.
greater cohesive whole.
At
And
the
the way they
top,
did that in that
I found my
conversation
friend.
was by talking about
My friend who
Y2K.
only a few weeks ago
Right.
had been on the brink of death.
You know, maybe that's
had
important to
been
the plot
cured
later.
through
Chances
the
are it's
power
not
of
because
water.
this is still Y2K, but
The water boiled in the particular style of
but
pots
that's really sort of
created
how
by the
you do it.
diabetic
Now
yogis
this
said
is
to have
spoiler alert.
amazing
This
healing
guy keeps
powers.
talking like this for like 20
Now,
minutes.
when my friend had
but
regained his strength tenfold,
but it's just him
I was
talking
in
about it. This
shock.
has no relevance to
I longed
anything.
to take a sample
Though,
of this
now
drink
that I
back
think
to an
about it,
American
the
laboratory
other
where it
possibility
would be
is that this
tested
is
and ultimately turned
actually
into
some
a
type
cure.
of satire where the
But
idea is your
I was
wizened
told
teacher
that
is
the
going
last
on and
bush
on
bearing
about
the
nothing
tea
of
had
particular
burned up in a
relevance, and
forest
that
fire.
in itself is supposed to be the
Naturally,
joke.
I demanded proof.
Well, he is actually
There was
talking
no
about something.
evidence
I'm
that
not
any
going to
such
ask you
fire
to
had
actually
occurred.
read what he's talking about because it's
furious on the point of
it is
striking the
something,
yogis. My
and
friend
it's
had to take me
coherent.
away.
Like it's explained
Together,
coherently. It's
we
not like he's
explored
just
the
sort of
mountainside for the remainder
going
of
on and on about
Now,
nothing in
despite my
particular.
anger,
He's
that
telling a
they would
story,
not let me
but
test the
Yeah,
tea.
the problem is not
Everything
necessarily
had
that
been
he's
incredibly
monopolizing
happy.
the conversation. The problem is
I've
that
always felt
none of
an
it is at all
incredible glow of
relevant.
joy. On our last day, before we were to return,
not to
earth
the extent
gave
we're
out
aware
beneath
anyway.
my feet, and I was stunned.
Well, I try to
Soon a
avoid
storm
playing
came.
too far into this
The
game,
storm was so
specifically
bad,
to
I feared it
avoid
would wipe away
spoiling
the mountain,
anything for
and I'd be stuck in a
myself
landslide.
or you. I know how much
This
you
is
are
where things
gripped by
became
this
interesting.
game's incredible story.
My friend
Incredible's
was able
a word
to
for it.
break away at the rocks binding my
It's-
feet with his bare hands.
YIIK's story
He
has at
expelled the
times been
disease from
described
his
as
body and
something.
achieved a new strength. I believe I would have died on that mountain had it not been for him. I hold true to the fact that he survived his cancer so he could save me. When we returned, the Yogi Hermit had left his camp. But he left behind the pot he created to cure my friend's cancer and a container of this tea.
Yeah, so this is why he's talking about this whole thing, is to explain why he has this absurdly valuable tea.
Yeah.
It is the literal cure to cancer.
And apparently grants super strength under the right enlightening circumstances.
Well, something like that. Michael isn't taking it very well.
Admittedly, that would kind of be my reaction at being offered
My friend Alex
tea
here is
like
looking
that.
for a
I mean,
record.
I like my
It's
tea, don't
called
get me
Mystical
wrong, but
Ultimate LP Legends.
there's a limit to the extent
That
to which
name.
I could
It sounds
comfortably
so
drink it.
familiar. How did you find out about this mystical LP?
$3,000 is about where I have to
Here,
sit
I
down
got
with a
it.
cup of tea and start thinking about my life choices. Hell, I wouldn't get out of bed for anything less than $2,000.
By Vela Wild.
Did you say Vela Wild?
Yeah. But didn't you know this already? It's on the cover. Did you even read it?
Well,
I...
alright then.
Yeah, of all the twists they could have picked for this whole arc, the last one I was expecting was that the name of the person who made it was
Clearly
on
she
the
was
cover.
the musician, the creator of this record. How stupid I had been. I told her about the record, and she must have assumed I read the title closely. Vela Wild. Probably a stage name.
How's it a stage name if it's how
Did I say something
how
wrong?
she's introduced herself
You,
to you,
kinda
independent
stopped
of this
talking for a while
entire
and looked all
adventure?
deep in thought.
Yeah, that is actually true.
I just realized
It's not
something.
really a stage name at that point. It's more like an alias,
Mine is
isn't
like
it?
that.
Yeah.
You keep many things hidden away, and they come out when they're the most needed.
Maybe
Did you ever
Vela's going to
consider
go all
that
I
this
have no
record
true
might
name
be
in the
locked
third act
away
sort of thing.
inside your
Yeah,
mind?
it'd be alright.
And if
Again,
not
I feel
yours, maybe inside
I
the mind
reiterate
of
my
this
point that I
wild
think this
character.
story would immediately make more sense if Bella
Damn.
was the hero.
So you don't have it?
Yeah. I think that's part of what they're trying to get at with this
It
whole
hasn't come out
postmodern thing. Like, the most postmodern thing
Check the date on the
about
back of it.
this game
See
so
the
far
sticker?
is that
Do
you
not
look at
sell
everybody
until
else and it's like,
January
why did they
1st,
pick this
2000.
guy to be the hero? It's
Since
sort of like
I'm
Far
not in
Cry 3,
contract
right? Did you play Far Cry 3?
I
least
certainly
in this
did.
life.
Okay,
I
so in
couldn't
Far Cry
possibly
3,
have
they
this record.
deliberately set up the all-American
Kids should
hero
pay
man
closer
to
attention
get
your record
murked in the
jackets.
prologue
lots
so
of
that you
useful
play his younger
information.
brother who ends up going off
Thanks
the
a lot.
deep end trying to be the
I know where
the
to
video
find this
game
record now.
ultra hero.
Yeah.
What?
I think that's kind of what they're trying to do, except Alex
I'll
never
explain
grows to
some
that
stuff
point
when
or
we get
changes
outside.
in a meaningful way. Obviously, Jason Brody's trajectory is a little bit concerning, and I hope Alex
Claudio,
doesn't go that
Chandra,
direction. But he doesn't
There's some
seem to
things I
make
wanna
any
let you
real
in on,
change at all.
Especially since you've
Frankly,
been so kind
if
to
he
me
does
since
go Jason Brody,
a
then
lot
at
of
least
this
that
still
would
sounds out there, and I
spice
know
up
that.
the narrative somewhat.
So listen to
Actually,
sincerity
you know
in my
what?
voice,
I
and
kind of take
not
that
so much
back.
the absurdity
You know what
of
would be a
what you
really,
said.
really postmodern thing for you to do in this game?
Hey!
What would that be?
That sounded pretty deep. Oh, sorry, man. Go on. sorry, man. Go on.
Well, that was weird. Welcome back, gang.
Entirely sure of
Hope
what's
you
going
enjoyed
on
that little
myself,
postmodern
so
interlude.
Some of the parts might seem a little hazy.
We worked very hard on it.
Here it goes.
I like
When I
to think
arrived
it
home
was
from college earlier this year,
a little something
I
special.
met Sammy Park.
You worked
I'd
very
followed
hard on
Kat
it.
into an old factory and I found her there.
I mean,
was alive
it was
and
an
well.
excuse
A
to
bit
play
odd,
Earthbound
but
again,
Pretty great, to be
or
honest.
at least look
I
at
tried to
content
help her get
related
out of
to
the building.
Earthbound.
Some beings known as soul survivors appeared
By all
and took
means,
her away.
do a little side-by-side
I later
between
met a
that
woman
and the
named
scene in the
Bella,
original game.
who told
I
us
think
that the
you'll be
soul
surprised.
survivors are beings from another reality.
I would
Unlike
argue
our
that
own.
you kind of did.
She
You
said that
did
these
very
beings have
good.
surrendered the right
A very
to
good
physical
recreation
form
of it.
in favor
Thank
of
you.
a
Thank you
spiritual
very
one.
much. But enough
With
about
this
that.
power,
We
they
have
could move within the soul space, which is the space
apparently
in between
words to
realities.
follow that are coming out of this man's
We met
mouth.
Rory, and Rory had recently
Yes.
lost his sister and encountered a soul survivor
Alex
himself.
is giving us the
Then I
Spark
found
Notes
out that
version
one of
on
these
everything
beings
that's
was living
happened
with
in the
me.
story thus far,
I
which
chased
I
her
don't
out of
know
my
why
house,
they couldn't have just
then into a
faded out
radio
and said,
tower.
and that's my story.
At that radio
Again,
tower.
I feel as though
asked me to play
the,
this
the only
record.
excuse, and it is admittedly kind of a good one given the circumstances,
So
is
that's
that we
why I've
want
been
to be
looking
able to track what Alex is actually saying in the
Didn't
event
expect
that
you to believe
he omits something
Rory,
or possibly lies
lost
about
your
something.
sister.
Though, again,
Sorry to hear
that's
that, man.
on reflection something that could probably be addressed
Yeah,
by, again,
thanks.
Alex going, and I told them
Losing a
everything,
sibling is a
but I
terrible
didn't say
burden on
this,
any
or
person.
something to that effect.
Let us know if you need anything.
Yeah. You know what? I'm probably not
yeah.
being fair to the game. You're absolutely right.
We've lost
That is
someone
something
before.
I should have been paying attention
It's
to.
It's like-
it's all right.
Maybe
I
that's
think
what
we
drew me
had
to
this
Sammy
exact
Park
same
case.
discussion approximately 15 episodes ago.
That sounds
What
about
the soul
right.
survivors and all
And
that?
yeah, Claudio is going to bring up the fact that
Let's
his
say
his
we've
younger
had
brother
experience
just
with the
disappeared one day.
I had a kid brother, you know. He went missing in 19.
He mentioned the same thing, in fact, when we were in the
one day to go to our neighbors.
rest area
7 houses up the street.
break type thing, just before he went up to
vanished.
see Ugu Sammy.
Never came
Yeah.
back. We looked for him for months. Dad never stopped. Still hands out flyers at the grocery store every Sunday.
And I
Even
will
got
say
an
that it
artist
is
to
kind
draw
of an
names.
interesting facet of
Was
this
there ever any
game's story
leads or
to
anything?
have all of these characters
No
be
one
brought
really ever
together by
investigated it.
not just their connection to
Sure, they looked
Onism,
around
but
for 'em.
the fact that Onism
For a
is
week, they had
their
a task force. They had one guy they suspected, but every lead fell through.
You act like they
the
even
fact that they're all
tried.
brought together by
4-year-old
some
black kid goes missing in a
tragedy
shit
or
neighborhood, and you think
disappearance
they
in the
really
family as being
tried?
their connecting thread.
Yeah,
The only problem I
It's
have
just-
with it is that,
it's complicated.
at least in
Alex.
Claudio and Chandra's case,
I don't
they
remember
came
this
along
being
on
the
this
news or
adventure
anything, and you're from Windtown, right? It's
mostly
an hour outside
for
of Frankton.
an
How the hell did this
opportunity
get
to see
national
Mark.
coverage?
Isn't it obvious?
That
man?
does seem kind of like what
Same
it's all
reason no one
about.
gives a shit about
Here's kind of the way that I'm reading this, and this actually sort of goes back to Far Cry 3, which I mentioned like a few minutes ago.
Mm-hmm.
So the way I kind of read it is that Onism is sort of maybe magic, maybe not. Like, maybe Onism has this weird supernatural ability to attract or draw people who have had traumatic experiences or disappearances in their lives. That would explain why Alex is on there. It would explain why Claudio and Chandra are on there. It would explain why Bella's on there. That sort of thing.
To get some attention for their daughter's
That
disappearance.
could be an enormously compelling
It's not that
thing
easy.
for an RPG to
Most
have.
people you see
But
on
maybe I'm
TV
giving
are
the game
people
too
who
much
can make
credit.
a great
I just don't
story
know
for the
too much
press.
yet.
I don't know
That's
that
just
it's
the way
about
it
giving the
works.
game credit at this point, as it is
I don't
somewhat
think I
coming
ever
up
gave
with
it
our
any
own
thought.
somewhat fanfic-esque
Yeah,
reasons for why something like that might
That's just
work.
how they get away with it.
I guess that's true.
People like
I
you
will
don't
say
think
this.
about it.
I like a couple of games
People like
where
us,
aspects of the story do seem
all
to
we
remain
ever get to
unexplained and allow for that kind of
kid
filling in
grows
of the
up.
blanks, because it means
Don't
that in
you
some
think
ways
it's
the
weird that a young woman
overall
goes missing
world
in
in
your
which the
town
game
and
takes
only
place
people
is
talking about
still
it are some weirdo kids on the internet,
kind of...
and they aren't really talking
Okay,
about
sorry,
her
I'm getting
awareness.
thrown by
You
what
guys think
exactly
off on
is
it
happening
anyway,
in
don't
this
you?
dialogue.
Yeah, where did this come from?
Fantasy about being the white knight
Okay.
swooping in and saving
It's the fact that the
exotic
world is still
Korean girl.
somewhat feels complete and gives rise to the
Easy
possibility of
now.
some
Okay,
explanation as to what's actually
Let's
happening
go find this record.
is ultimately to its
Well,
strength. And even if we end up coming up with something better and the game disappoints
You guys
us,
are coming along?
there's something to appreciate about the fact that
Back to Frankton. We
at
used
the
to
very
be Bella,
least,
the girl who made
things
this album.
like literary analysis can still see us through it.
No, totally.
I hate to admit it, but sometimes
I'm
I
not going to
just wish
fault
we
the
could let
game
him
for
go.
trying to do something
younger brother,
interesting
you
with
know?
its story, right?
Right.
Not a day goes by where I don't
Like,
think about it.
yes, I
And
think
you know
this
what's
game
really
is kind of bad, but I also think this game could potentially do some things right. I feel it's important to give the game credit.
Other kid to me.
Or at least the benefit of the doubt.
Playing video games, or falling off a bike.
You don't remember anything about him?
No, I don't think so. I think I only remember what people tell me about him. And you know what's funny? He was my twin brother. I was a minute older.
That's a good question. In this universe, do you think it's likely that twins would have ESP?
You're his twin. Can't you feel him out there?
Certainly considerably more likely than this one.
That let you know if he's
It's a good guess, right? With the whole Earthbound
I don't
thing?
believe in that stuff. Well,
Yeah.
not
There's
usually.
actually a...
Sometimes I
There's a real precedent for that
Yeah.
from a better game.
Yeah.
He isn't out there anymore.
Though,
If there
I'm trying
was
to
a
remember if there were,
I
know,
feel
outside of
something.
NPC
And since there is
occurrences,
nothing
actual
there,
twins within
He
Earthbound.
must be gone. Sometimes people just vanish. They are there one moment and gone the next. Bad people take them, they fall into sewers, but life has to move on. It's harder for my parents, I think, since they made him and whatever. But Claudio? I don't think he'll ever move on.
I mean, this is
It's all
an
he
interesting
thinks about.
discussion to have. I feel like it's
And
slightly in the
finding
wrong
this
place.
Sammy
Oh,
pot girl,
I think this is
this obsession
absolutely
you brought
something
onto
worth
him?
discussing, but
This shit isn't fair.
this again strikes me
He
as
had one dead kid to
something
worry
where
about never
the
finding,
author was just
and
sort
now
of
you
looking
gave
for
him
another reason to be upset with Alex. Like they wanted you to be pissed off at Alex for how dare you make Claudio relive this horrible trauma of having his younger brother disappear, right?
But we'll talk more about it next time.